uppercut, try to hit me in the gut, thinking that I won't react. You whispering my name, thinking I won't be the same, turn fiction into fact. See what you didn't know, bruises that I'll never show, slipping on your every jab. So tighten up your fist, step into the ring with this, I hope your mama's got your back. First round, you thought you would've knocked me down. Fifth round, bleeding out the side of your mouth. Final round, holding the sound of my name in the crowd. You didn't bust. Oh, 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 oh. You didn't bust. Oh, 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 oh. Just 'cause I took a break, you're making a huge mistake, thinking you can take the throne. Look at you trembling, step into the lion's den, bet you wish you stayed at home. Begging for mercy underneath your breath when I ain't even sweating yet, my legend's written in the stone, yeah. You're crying age in defeat is now your only friend, even your mama's gotta know. First round, you thought you would've knocked me down. Fifth round, bleeding out the side of your mouth. Final round, holding the sound of my name in the crowd. You didn't bust. Oh, 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 oh. You didn't bust. Oh, 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 First round, fifth round, final round. Oh, yeah. First round, fifth round, final round. No, 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 no. First round, you thought you would've knocked me down. Fifth round, bleeding out the side of your mouth. Final round, holding the sound of my name in the crowd. You didn't bust. Oh, 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 oh. You didn't bust. Oh, oh, oh,
Well, welcome everyone to Downtime. Thank you for joining us. Wow, it's been a minute, hasn't it? Of course, yeah, we were basically all together for that, and that was an interesting show. And you had described people that you know sort of going around in almost a state of shell shock, for lack of a yeah. That's sort of where I've been. I think that's sort of where a lot of people are. I've heard a lot of really great advice about sort of getting up off the mat and getting back to it, but I think that sort of happens for everybody in different ways and at a different rate. But for me, the first thing I thought of. And I had forgotten. I was talking with my dad a long time ago. This was high school or something. And I actually, it must have been during the Cold War. And I was freaking out because the U.S. had gone to DEFCON 2 or something like that. At least that's what the news was reporting. It was a lot harder to tell in those days because there was no such thing as the internet. And I was like, oh my God, it's all going to end. And my father just like, the world is a much harder place to destroy than people think it is. And corporations tend to be a little harder to sink than people say in countries and so on and so forth. It happens, but, in the end, you get help from sort of the strangest places. And I remember when I was teaching high school, when Pakistan and India were fighting pretty significantly over Kashmir, and Pakistan announced that they were releasing control of tactical nuclear weapons into the field, giving generals in the field the authority to deploy those weapons if they so chose. Now, that's what they said. I personally think that they never actually did it. I think it was like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You don't get to deploy those weapons without talking to the president first.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, everybody was freaking out about, World War III because Pakistan was allied with Russia and the U.S. was allied with India. So the number of times that we've seen World War III trending and that we've seen, all of these things that people freak out about, and it hasn't happened, and that doesn't mean we're not going to get into Hume tonight, but that doesn't mean it won't happen. But having said that, I think the odds are very much in our favor. I will say I've been sort of trying to wrap my head around what troubles me the most, and I'm curious if this is the same for you, Lance. But one of the things I think that troubles me the most is you just keep thinking and wishing that our country would do a better job than it's doing. And the fact that he could even be elected again, everybody's freaking out about the damage he could do, and it could be a lot. It could be mitigated in lots of ways. I think we're going to learn more about that in the coming months. Yeah. But all that notwithstanding, the one thing we know is, after seeing what a fraud he is for so long, we still went down that road. And I think that's what has been hardest for me. So I don't know what your thoughts are.
It doesn't and hasn't surprised me that he has a following. I never imagined it was this strong a large a following. I mean, the first time and the second time he ran was bad enough, but this time he actually got the popular vote. And I think it says something about the fact that more and more Americans are feeling that the system isn't working for them anymore. That government doesn't have their best interests at heart, that the economy isn't dependable, that they can count on having a job, that get an education that will lead to a better job. All of that starting to come to a point where people feel that the system is failing for one reason or another. And I know that people on different sides of the political spectrum have different feelings about what the problems are, but I think everybody would agree on all sides that there are problems that we need to have addressed that we aren't doing a good job of addressing. And I think that may be one of the big issues that led to what happened on Tuesday, which is that enough people were feeling alienated that they just said, okay, let's try something different. I'm not saying I agree with them. I'm not saying I'm sympathetic. I'm just saying I understand how people could arrive at that position.
Well, and I'm curious. I've always, we'll talk about that in a minute. Savvy, $5, and Savvy is I think that was just meant to be like a supportive super sticker. That's my interpretation. So thank you, Savvy, so much. Savvy's a member, so we appreciate both your membership and the super sticker. Thank you so much for that. We appreciate it, and we appreciate it, all our members and supporters. So thank you. Yeah, well, I think I will be honest. I think I've noticed before that a number of the traits that I don't really like on the right are sometimes traits I myself possess. There absolutely is the working man's chip, on his shoulder, the idea that oh, well, you think you're better than me because you're in the ivory tower, and I'm sitting there going, well, you think you're better than me because, you quote, work for a living. If, if memorizing facts and figures and learning languages and, doing all those intellectual things is so easy, why aren't you doing it? So I've had that as well. Do you think there was, I've said this before. You've heard me say this before. I'm curious as to your thoughts. I think you've given them before, but I'll ask again. We certainly, I think there was a sense of, we've proven we're better than you when Obama was elected. I think there is some genuine cause for liberals to be proud. I think all of the best legislation that has come out of this country has come from the liberal side. But having said that,
no argument.
Pride does come before a fall. So have we been a little too prideful and a little too much like, hey, you MAGA, you're so stupid that we're going to have to make this a better country without whether you agree with it or not?
There's an aspect of that, but I think in part it's because the liberal side of the equation doesn't do a good job, or arguably even make much of an effort to explain why the stuff that's being pushed by the right won't work. And I'll give you an example here that my wife got in her Twitter feed this morning. Apparently in Pennsylvania, there's a guy who owns a manufacturing company. Not a huge thing, just, large enough. And he called his workers in this morning, or yesterday morning, I suppose, and told them, look, I'm sorry, but you're not going to be getting your usual Christmas bonus this year. And, everybody's upset. He said, let me explain why. It's because Trump has repeatedly stated that he intends to put tariffs on imports coming from China. All of the component parts that go into the items that we produce in this factory come from China. That means the price of those items, when we buy them from China, we have to pay more to cover that tariff. And they said, no, that's not how a tariff works. The Chinese are going to pay. And he says, no, you really don't understand. He sold you a line of crap and you ate it up like it was dessert. And so he spends the next 30 minutes trying to explain to them, and they finally get it, but they're still grousing about it. Well, it's all Biden's fault. Yeah, exactly. And the idea is, how can you not be willing to do the most basic research to understand what the issues of the day are so you can make an informed vote on these things? And then how, once it's explained to the point where you understand it, can you still blame the other side who had nothing to do with what's about to happen? It's, we've dug this giant series of trench lines on opposite sides of the political aisle, and we're flinging shit at each other. And at some point, we need to stop flinging shit, and we need to start talking to each other to find a way to break the impasse and solve the problems. And that's going to be a very difficult thing to do, I think, because so many people are entrenched in their thinking.
I mean, I can imagine one thing that causes it, which is some form of collapse at which we sit there and say, okay, now we've poked enough holes in the boat that we're all going to have to get together, start putting our fingers in whatever hole we can find, regardless of ideology, because we're all about to sink. So that's one thing that that can start to reverse that trend. Is there anything else that you can think of? Your history is definitely stronger than mine. Is there anything else that you could think
Plug
of
the holes, bail, or get the hell out of the boat.
Yeah. Well, Neil 604 was in earlier, and I was just like, have you got a couch? Because Neil's out of Canada, and so just like, have you got a couch that I'm asking for 140 million friends, 4-year lease on a couch. I'll pay just about anything, but. So,
I think the issue is that there are certain individuals and factions that benefit from increasing the level of chaos, increasing the level of rancor, increasing the division. And we have given them access to spewing their lies and misinformation and half-truths to the extent that people now rely on that rather than reliable, unbiased sources or bothering to do their own research. So you turn on Fox and they say, Democrats bad, kill all Democrats. And, okay. How's that constructive? How does that solve the problem? But we don't, as a nation, go in and say, okay, somebody needs to tell Fox News you can't do that kind of crap. You can't tell outright lies. You can't try to provoke problems. And to be fair, that same kind of mindset and way of trying to shape opinion exists on the left almost as much as it does on the right. So nobody's blameless. It's that we've changed the way we receive and process information. And people used to subscribe to one or more newspapers, and the newspapers, generally speaking, tended to practice a certain degree of journalistic integrity and how they reported on stuff. Yeah, they might shape it a little bit. They'd have op-ed pieces that would skew one side or the other. But people did that, and because you were reading that news, you then also had kind of you become more willing to actually do a little more reading outside of what's on just that newspaper to try to get your information. Nowadays, you just turn on your social media stream and, yep, there's all I need to know for the world is 3 guys who, live in the outskirts of Moscow told me what's right and what's wrong, and that's all I need to know.
Well, and I think information comes at us so fast now that rather than having an interest in being right and maybe even being able to go to the water cooler and say that, hey, I researched this, I know what I'm talking about, would rather actually be the one at the water cooler who's being told what's right, so we don't actually have to think anymore for ourselves. We're looking for the news organizations that are going to say, here it is, served to you on a platter. This is what to think, and you say, oh, thank God, I don't have to worry. There's just one less thing I have to do in the day. And again, it happens on both sides. 𝐍𝐤𝐜𝐴 I was a fan of, but I was a fan of it in the same way that I'm a fan of Star Wars. I don't think it's real. I just think it's fun to watch, 𝐍𝐤𝐜𝐴 was, absolutely, no. I mean, he got some stuff right. He did research, but his perspective was so skewed, it was completely unreliable. So we did get a super chat. I'd like to, all right, there we go. So, let's see. Okay, so, Aaron Colson, thank you so much, Aaron, for the super chat. We really appreciate it. Again, we get demonetized pretty frequently, more than half our shows, so it really does help.
Too.
Yeah, it's good. Here are two questions I would like to hear the two of you discuss. One, how bad is it going to get, and how is it? And by that I mean how is it? I assume Aaron means how is it going to be expressed, not how is in the means by which. But we may hit both. And then two, what can we do to lessen that effect, to lessen the badness? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, how bad is it going to get? I don't have my crystal ball handy, so I can't tell you. But at the worst extreme that it could go, effectively, we're seeing the end of democracy in this country. Do I think that's likely to happen? No, but I do think we're going to be nudged in that kind of a direction slowly. Part of the problem is we have not part of the problem, part of the saving grace, if you will, is that we have competing factions within the Trumpian camp. And they're almost more interested in feuding with each other than they are with eliminating the opposition. Because they're terrified that, if I let that guy become Secretary of State or Defense or whatever, he's going to be able to exclude me from the circle of power, and I'm nobody. I can't have that happen. Whereas, why are they going to have to worry about the Democrats? They're in the minority. They don't have any say in the executive. They don't control the courts, etc. So, yeah, they'll probably not focus on that, at least initially. But that's only a possibility. It could get very bad. I sent you a thing this morning.
Yes, and I'd like to talk about that separately. I think that's a good thing to talk about. Yeah.
Sure, but that's one of those doom and gloom, the world's coming to an end kind of scenarios that some have speculated. That's what's going to happen. I think what we're going to see is they will try to put in motion some of the things they have threatened to do, but we'll find that the bureaucracy, machine of state, whatever you want to call it, moves relatively slowly. So it will be hard for them to push a lot of what they want through, simply because, like Trump, many of the people that he's going to bring into the cabinet and other senior positions think that because I'm in charge, I'm the decider, all I have to do is say what I want and it magically occurs, regardless of how improbable, illegal it may be. So that's going to be an issue for many of them. For example, one of the things that they were talking about was, within 30 days, they would have fired or put on furlough 50% of all federal workers. Huh. Well, that really can't be done because there are regulations and practices in place to prevent them from doing that quickly. Does it mean they won't try? Sure, they'll try if that's one of their goals and objectives. The same thing applies to eliminating Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. All of this flows through the same aperture of how much can they do as opposed to what they want to do. Here's what they want to do, and here's what they can do is a much narrower channel that they have to get past.
Well, unlike you, I do have a crystal ball. My crystal ball's name is Commander Lance McMillan.
Never trust that asshole.
and unfortunately, my crystal ball isn't giving me squat now. Usually, I tell people in real life that I'm a writer. Nobody in real life that I know knows I do YouTube. And then they ask me military questions and stuff like this, and I give them these insane answers. And like, how the hell do you know all that shit? I was just like, well, It's just, I thought everybody knew these things. And if I don't know the answer, it's like, let me think about it. And I come back and it's like, so Lance, I got a question. It's just like, oh, that's easy. So now that my crystal ball is not giving me an answer, I suppose I'm kind of SOL.
I mean, if you want me to give you a worst case scenario, sure, we'll dig into that. But I don't think that's constructive at this point. I think we really haven't seen what they're going to do. They've made a lot of promises about things they were going to do, but as we saw with his first term, a lot of the stuff he promised then never came to fruition either. So you can't trust what the guy or his minions tell you. They spout BS all the time.
And we've had we've had this discussion both on air and off, myself and a number of other people, and I've started to coalesce around an answer. But again, it's this shell shock because we didn't think we'd really have to take this seriously, and none of us thought we lived in a country where we'd have to take this seriously, and here we are. I think a couple of things. Lance pointed this out, and I think this is, well, okay. Let me start out by, I don't think Donald Trump himself is the biggest problem. In my view, Elon Musk and RFK Jr. are going to be two really big problems, and the reason is because I think Elon Musk is an accelerationist, and I don't think Trump is smart enough to be an accelerationist. I think he's just a narcissist. Elon Musk is a narcissistic accelerationist. So you put him in charge of the government workforce, and we're going to start to see some significant problems across the board. The good news is that those problems are going to affect everybody roughly equally. Probably going to affect MAGA and conservative states and states that rely on welfare. Those states more. Texas, if I recall, last I checked, 30% of Texas's budget comes from the federal government. So if the federal government starts dramatically pulling back what it's giving to the states, it ain't going to affect my state. It isn't going to affect my state. My state gets less money back than we pay in taxes federally. Yeah. We get back less. It's states south of the Mason-Dixon line that have a tendency to get more. So he's going to start hurting those people, and my suspicion is that those are the people who are actually going to end up feeling more betrayed and angry at Trump than we will.
I fully anticipate after 4 years of the kind of nonsense we are expecting to occur, that a lot of MAGAs are going to realize that they are far worse off than they were before he took office. A whole myriad of things he's going to allegedly try to do. So, will they abandon the cult? Who knows? My money would be on no, but they're still going to be unhappy, and it will probably be, as you see with medieval cultures, or the Age of Enlightenment kind of stuff, where you never blame the king for the ills of the country. It's always the king's advisors and ministers who are the trouble. I think that will be one of the things that will fall out of this. The Donald can do no wrong, but that Musk guy, look at all the bad things he's doing. I think he needs to get rid of him.
But that was the point. How many...
and that plays into the thing I was talking about just before, which is that there are so many little sub-factions and groups within the MAGA organization called all his higher-ups. They're all going to be looking for those little tiny cracks in the system to exploit for their own benefit, to bring down the guy who's, his rival. And you saw exactly that kind of stuff go on in the Nazi government. Everybody wanted to be with Hitler, FaceTime with him, but other than that, they had no loyalty or willingness to cooperate with one another at all. Everybody in the system was a competitor with one another.
And we've already seen that significantly in Congress, and I think it's going to get worse really quickly in Congress. If Marjorie Taylor Greene ends up if Marjorie Taylor Greene really does end up being speaker or anything like that, she's not competent, and I mean, it's going to be herding cats, and all she's going to do really is be able to threaten people and be shrill and irritate the living daylights out of everyone, such that nobody's going to want to cooperate, whether they like, agree with, or are intimidated by Trump in the slightest. So I think those are all things that we've got going for us. I think for those of us who've been paying attention for a while, and I think that's basically our entire audience, and I'm proud of that, you know, not just Roe v. Wade, but the Chevron doctrine and any other number of significant losses in the U.S. Supreme Court now followed by this. But I think Commander has a point, and it's what I think both he and I were saying, which was at some point you hit rock bottom and it bounces up. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, we can even see the divisions within the cult right now, looking at the results of the election. So I don't remember which states it was. 5 very red states that voted very much in favor from Republican governors, et cetera, all voted to enshrine in their constitution protections for women's rights to choose to some degree or another, which is completely at odds with what the official party line is. So there are clearly, there's no real agreement on what people want to be done within the system. And I think that is an important takeaway here, is that, yeah, they think they've won, and they think they're going to have this, you know, roller coaster ride that will lead them to nirvana or, you know, gates of heaven or whatever thing it is that they're looking for. I think they're going to end up spending more time arguing with each other over petty shit, and they'll never get accomplished half of what they want.
Well, and that's certainly been the truth. I mean, how much of the border wall did he actually finish, and how much of that was paid for by Mexico? I mean, he did work on it, but you know, it wasn't. All right, $10 from a Xandering person. Any show without me deserves support. I'm not going to say you're wrong. I'm just going to leave it at that.
I think he offers an important alternate view to a lot of stuff.
Oh, yes, he does.
Different viewpoint. He offers a different viewpoint that I think is important for the audience to hear, because we don't want to be the kind of echo chamber that we're criticizing the MAGAs of worshiping at. I think we do need to hear alternate.
We'll put the joking aside and say I've been proud to have him as the co-host of In Time, which is the flagship show for a number of years now. And one of the reasons is he and I have disagreed on a number of significant things. We've had only one formal debate, but it was a good debate. And when each of us said something that was dishonest in some way or another, by like inadvertently, we corrected ourselves. He corrected himself. Or when I had a good point, he said, "You know what? That's a good point, and I don't have an answer to that. I will find the answer, and maybe you're right, and maybe it'll go my way, but I'll admit, right, I'm not going to just make up an answer. I don't know." And it's just like, so he's someone that we can disagree with, and that offers pushback, but is always polite and an active listener, actually listens to and gives us the other side quite frequently. So very proud to have him. Just don't tell him I said that. I think Porpoise still has the fund for what is it, getting Xandering, what is it, gender studies degree. So I think that's. I said, "What? I didn't do exactly." As Xandering was, we can bounce him out and then he can come back after. Yeah, I think it is going to get bad. I think our currency is going to take a huge hit. I think our economy is going to take a pretty significant hit. By the way, it took a really bad hit in 2008. I don't know if it's going to get that bad. It might even get worse, but I'm not convinced that it's going to get even that bad. That wasn't good.
Somebody was saying it's going to be worse than, I think it was 79.
Worse than 79. I hope that's not true. I think it's undeniably possible. I don't know how.
We have a lot of doomsaying going on right now.
We do, yeah, and
understandable.
Hopefully, he's just incompetent.
hopefully, he's just incompetent.
Yeah. Well, and that's the good news is when he's incompetent, he hires people who don't work well together, and he hires and they fight with each other, which is exactly what you were saying. It's rare that you get the competent fascist, and when you do, that's when you have Stalinism, and you've got real problems. He knew what the hell he was doing.
And it also leaves open the question of how long is Trump going to be president?
That's a good question. This race appears to have taken a lot out of him.
Yeah, well, not just that, but there's a lot of speculation by people I have some degree of respect for, that the plan all along was to get him into the White House a second time, and then rapidly replace him with Vance, who's a more controllable, pliable, less wingnut kind of person. So the question is, when will they move to invoke the 25th? And if they do, will they be able to get the popular following to make it stick? Because given the cult status of the man, if they move to push him out, how is the base going to react to that? It could get real ugly real fast.
That's a good point. I wanted to bring that up. I do regret to say, I do think aside from, so to get back to the question, it was a $5 super chat, but it was a $1,000 or the $1 million question, which is how bad is this going to get? You had mentioned something, and I think this is unfortunately probably true. We're going to see a significant uptick in violence, both because he's ostensibly the leader of the country. He likes to talk about and think in terms of violence, so that's going to make violence more appropriate. So you're going to see, I would imagine, crime rates go up and violence across the country. I think you're going to see it go up. But also, I think you're going to see him building some form of private army to enforce his will in his way. And I think we had that question, well, what happens when the grandmother goes up into, well, what happens when the young student from Beijing University stands in front of the tank in Tiananmen Square? I mean, unfortunately, we've seen the answer to that. And it's the opposite of what we'd think, but that's why we're so upset that Trump won, is because of who he is. So I think in those regards, we're going to see a significant increase in violence and crime domestically. The economy is going to take a hit because he does not know how to manage it, and anybody who's competent to manage it is not going to want to work for him. So I think he really does. I think no matter how many times it's explained to him, he still thinks this tariff thing is, I think he's going to do it, and I think he has no idea what he's doing, and everybody's going to suffer. Yeah.
I mean, farmers suffered hugely when he put, tariffs on, his first term on the agricultural stuff, to China. And yeah, I can see him doing even worse this time, with expanding it to anything coming from China. And how's that going to impact everything? Go to the ports of Los Angeles, Oakland, and Seattle, and you can see how much trade comes from China. It's enormous.
Let me just see. Okay. So yeah, I think we're going to be looking at hard times across the board, financially, socially. I think he is going to. I don't know that he's outright going to say there should be a constitutional amendment banning abortion, or that there should be a law banning abortion countrywide. But I don't think he's going to actively oppose one either. And I think if one lands on his desk, I don't think he's going to veto it. So there's going to be problems.
I think he may not sign it either. I think he may just stick it in the drawer and forget about it.
Yeah, but if it doesn't
and
get
again, I go back to
yeah.
my statement
Yeah.
regarding those 5 states that ran initiatives regarding women's reproductive rights that were Republican states that voted that in. You know, he and the smarter minds around him are going to look at that and say, you know, this may be a bridge too far to cross at this point. We can run the legislation, we can comment on it, but then signing it might not be the best thing. And you're going to end up with huge amount of fights trying to go on, you know, getting states to ratify a supposedly amendment to the Constitution. It doesn't. You'll never get the support of California, Oregon,
I'm not talking
New York.
I'm talking a law. So just by legislative action saying that no state is permitted to, that now he signs it. Now that violates what the Supreme Court has already said. But having said that, if this goes to the court, I believe in their level. I truly believe so much in this Supreme Court's level of hypocrisy that I have no problem believing.
Overrule themselves on the ruling they just made last week. Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
I hold both two. It's like we are at war with East Asia. We have always been at war with East Asia. That's what I'm thinking. So, but either way, I think, and if he puts RFK at the head of the CDC, which he said he's going to do, and I have no reason to think he's not going to do it, I think we're going to see an attempt to immediately dismantle it. Again, institutional resistance will slow it down, but you know, he's a vaccine denier. He's dangerous.
Hey, when infection rates to every damn disease and childhood illness you can imagine start rising, people are going to start asking questions.
Yep.
It's all going to land right on his desk.
So I don't think, and I think you concur with me on this, which is I don't think that we're looking at nightmare hellscape. And it's interesting because that was the rhetoric that a lot of us, myself included, were talking about if he gets elected. And that's why, and that's why sometimes that rhetoric matters, because did that rhetoric actually in some way or another in a unforeseen way also contribute to people wanting to vote for him, because that kind of thing can happen as well. So I don't know. But having said that, now that we're facing the reality, it's sobering. And I think it's sobering for the entire planet as they're, you know, I'm reading headlines in German. I can't speak German. You don't need to speak German to understand what the headline is saying. Something like Uber clown or nightmare clown or something. It's just like it was. Yeah. I was just like it definitely sounded very negative. So. You know, it's sobering to realize that this country is going to stop progressing forward for a little while and start going backwards. Having said that, welcome to the history of mankind. It's always been 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Always. It just sucks to have to be in that 1 step back. But that's where you can have I think, some modicum of positivity and hope, because, I've got 2 kids. I'm worried about their future. But if we can go through this now today, before my kids actually own a home, before they're trying to really make a living for themselves, and 4 years from now, sit there and say, well, let's never fucking do that again.
You're assuming that memory will extend that long.
Well, that's a
If you
really
look
good
at
question.
the way our presidential elections tend to go, as you get one party for 8 years, then you get another party for 8 years, the same party back again, and it waffles back and forth, because people over the course of 8 years get how screwed up the other side made it, or at least screwed up in their estimation of how things should be.
Titans got it. It was Horror Clown. That was it. Horror Clown. I took a look at that. I was just like, and the clown was spelled with a K. So I was like, okay, it's. I don't speak German, but I am aware this is not a compliment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Titan. That was I was going to look that one up because I remembered it was good. Oh, dear Lord. So I hope that answers your question. I'm hoping you're still in the live chat, and I hope that you feel like it was certainly, I think hopefully that was $5 worth. Any question? Here is the one we didn't answer. What can we do to lessen the badness, or to rephrase that? What can we do to mitigate this, do you think, going forward?
I think we continue like we've been doing, say, with Ukraine, is to bombard elected officials with communication saying, I don't like this, I want this. Even if they're from the other party, if enough people are writing them, they will take note, and they will have to mollify to some degree the actions they're taking. I think we kind of band together as a community to support one another. Find that somebody's in need or is under threat, we do something to help them. And I think that's one of the important things, that to an odd degree, social media both helps and hurts, in that we've now found new communities that we wouldn't have otherwise been aware of. And at the same time, we've kind of lost touch with our actual physical communities to a large extent. So, I'll put this in perspective. I have more meaningful conversations with people that I meet here in the shows and other discussions online than I do with my next door neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
And let's be honest, if there's really a crisis, like, let's say where I'm out right here, it erupts and cut off and lose power for a month or more, I can't depend on people I know on the internet, because I won't have internet to talk to you. But that neighbor who lives across the road, yeah, that person is there and has access to things that I might need. We share and help each other out. So I think it's the same situation here. Is, as we hear certain actions are being taken by the incoming administration that we disagree with or don't like, we do what we can to support the people who are the most impacted by those decisions.
I'm gonna piggyback off of that. So I'm gonna say 2 things. One, I do think, and I think that this is sort of everybody's doing this right now, right? Which is we're in that shell shock period. But I think that the good thing about that is that's nature's way of saying maybe you should sit back and take stock. The reality is he got roughly the same number of votes as he did last time. Except last time he didn't win the popular vote. He did this time. Why? Because the Democratic vote was lower. Didn't turn out. And
voted for other people, including Trump.
And so
I cited an example to you last time we spoke of Dearborn, Michigan, which has one of the highest concentrations of Muslims living in this country. largely voted either for Stein or Trump. I want you to think about that. This is the guy who put the Muslim ban in place during his first administration. Is going to give a green light for Israel to massacre any guy who, uses the Quran instead of the Torah. And yet they still voted for him and didn't vote against him. Why? Because they were pissed that Biden hadn't been stronger condemning Israel. Well, you have to look at these things through gradations. Which is going to impact you personally the most? And yeah.
Yep. So I do hope that we're going to sit and reflect how and why we were not able to get the message out. There's another, I heard a lot of people saying that she was constantly sort of attacking how bad Trump was, but wasn't clear enough on her own policies. I'm sure we're going to get into discussions like that ad nauseum. And or is it that America is not yet ready for a female president? And if that's the case, why not? So many other countries are. Have been for a while. Yeah.
I think you can't put it all on the shoulders of massage, because there's also the issue of race that plays into it in this case as well.
That's true.
And when you put those two on top of each other, plus it's a liberal, plus it's somebody from California, all of that combined together, you just pissed off, regardless of anything actually substantive that she's, saying she's going to do. It has pissed those people off to the point where they won't vote for her. So it's a terrible tragedy. That's the case. That's the reality of this country, and I think the Democrats need to start considering that rather than trying to push that kind of an agenda. Oh yeah, we really want a woman in the White House. Yeah, but let's be honest with ourselves, guys. If that's going to cost you 2 or 3 million votes nationwide, maybe it's not the brightest move.
Well, certainly not while the alternative is Donald J. Trump. That's going to cost everybody a huge amount and probably get a number of people killed. That notwithstanding, the other thing that I was thinking was that midterms are only 2 years, and the Republicans are very good at owning the midterms, and they work on that, and that's something we have to get our game up on, because the midterms, every single House seat is up. Every House seat is up. So if we lose the House, we can get it back in 2 years, just 2 years. A third of the Senate seats are up, and it's harder to get it back, especially given the margin at this point, but it's still technically possible. And if we get back the House, at least,
especially if you have a really bad record of how things are playing out.
Yes.
The 2 years. So the economy is completely tanked, and we're going into a major recession / depression, and all of that adding on top of it. Yeah, the chances of Republicans getting elected after they've proven that they can't manage the thing when they're given all the advantages. Yeah, I can see that happening easily.
I think in terms of what can we do to mitigate this, the first thing is genuinely everybody take a few minutes to reflect, take a couple days, take what you need to reflect. This was a hard loss for everybody. Acknowledge that, own the fact that we're all disappointed, own the fact that in part it's a referendum on our country. It's also a referendum on our ability to express and share our views and get other people on board with them. It's multiple failures. Own it, and then say, okay, we have
yeah, go ahead.
We have multiple opportunities coming up in the near future to start to roll this back and roll it back significantly if we get back on that horse and take this seriously. Yeah. So
start playing your cards right now. Don't wait until 18 months from now. I hate to say it, but the day Biden was sworn in is the day that Trump started working on his reelection campaign.
Yep.
And when did Biden, let alone Harris, start actively campaigning? That's something we need to start. We, the liberals, progressives, Democratic American politics, need to start thinking about is that this is a very serious game, and you can't just. You need to be focused, razor sharp on how you're going to proceed, what you're going to try to accomplish, how you're going to accomplish it. Lay that groundwork early.
So one thing I'd like to do, Native Atheist, $10 super chat, a big heart, Native Atheist. It is so good to see you again. It's been a while, and I've seen you around since we've been back, but we haven't. It's still so nice. We haven't been back all that long, and to see so many of the old people coming back, which really warms my heart, and I'm very touched by that. Thank you for your continued support, and also it's nice to meet so many new people that we've met too. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you again for the $10 super chat. We really appreciate it. We also have AF Kaplan asking, assuming Social Security is bankrupt, is there any hope that it could be reestablished later? I am not entirely an expert on this, but essentially my understanding is that Social Security isn't bankrupt in the traditional sense. It's not something that operates that way. It's just sort of like on paper it's bankrupt, but it pulls from it just pulls from the general budget of the United States. So it's bankrupt on paper, but as long as the United States isn't bankrupt, it still gets paid.
I think the bigger fear is that the Republican/Trump administration will try to phase it out. So they will make it, they'll change the regulations so that you can't start drawing until later that you can't have. And the amounts that you get back are going to be less. They probably won't grandfather it for people who are already on it, but I can see them changing it for people who aren't already on it. The issue there is, I think it's worth remembering that one of the major strong support groups for the Republicans in MAGA are older people. And what's the quickest way to piss those people off and lose their support beyond stopping their Social Security checks? I mean, think about that. So, yeah, I don't think it's going to disappear, but I do think that they will make efforts to do something to phase it out over a longer period.
Because they don't get into politics otherwise, left or right, most people don't realize this, but basically one of the most powerful lobbies in the U.S. is the AARP.
Yeah, no kidding.
It is stunning. And when you get into politics and you start, like, whether it's at like a district level or whatever it is, and then you start to realize that you have to take the AARP and what they say seriously. They don't speak often, but when they speak, you listen, because they don't play, and if they don't want you there, you've got a real big problem on your hands. So yeah, I think that's a really good point, and Trump is aware.
Yeah, it's one of those. My broker is Charles Schwab, and Charles Schwab says, and everybody at the restaurant stops and listens. Same thing, you know. ARP says, everybody stops in politics and listens in.
Here's a good question. But what has UTV and Ham says cutting veterans benefits will piss me off big time. Trump and the military,
again, going to be really tough for them to do that, because existing benefits that are already being paid out are effectively a contract signed by the government with that individual. So again, I don't think they will eliminate existing payments, But I can easily see them starting to phase aspects of that out. So, for example, VA benefits is a perfect case in point. They may say, okay, well, what we're going to do is we're going to privatize it. So you have to have, we'll pay 80% of your bill for your private insurance that will cover it. Yeah, and they'll start phasing it that way, or they'll do it for only people that are retiring or on disability who are leaving service now, that kind of thing. Again, if AARP is a powerful political lobby that gets listened to, MOAA is another one, which is very powerful and gets listened to a lot. You don't know what that is. That's Military Officers Association.
I did not. I was going to ask. So, well, let's be honest. I wasn't going to ask because we're like, oh yeah. No, absolutely. I have no idea what you just said, but I'm not going to cop to it. All right. So thank you. AARP, 38 million members. Now, I think I'm guessing 5 million for NRA. I could be wrong. If you can look up NRA and tell us what that is, I want to say it's 5 million, but that could be a sort of. Also, I was talking to Michael's. Just looked up AARP. Somebody, let me know what the. Hold on. I'd be curious to know because we always, when we think of powerhouse lobbies, we think of the NRA, but the AARP dwarfs them. It's just that the AARP has such a narrow.
NRA claims it has 79 million members. However, the Pew estimate is only 14 million. It's still a big number, don't get me wrong.
Yeah. Well, and let's see, and I think we're going to start to wrap this up
Sure.
in just a few minutes. But AARP armed and really pissed. That's from UTVN. Yeah. And Sister Porpoise, $2. Does which has the better Navy, AARP or the NRA?
Let's see, 2 drunk guys in a rowboat with a shotgun, or old people with yachts. That's a good one.
Well, that's who has the better Navy, the Army or the Navy, and I guess the better Navy would be the Navy, but the larger Navy would be the Army.
The larger Navy is actually the Army. The Army has more watercraft than the Navy does. Don't ask. That's all I'm going to say. It gets really freaking complicated to explain it all.
Well, and then let's see. The largest air force on the planet is the U.S. Air Force. The second largest, the first largest air force on the planet is the U.S. Air Force. The second largest air force on the planet is the U.S. Navy.
Yep. The U.S. Marine Corps is up there somewhere too.
Oh, God. And by the way, there's on some level, honestly, here I am, the liberal, saying there's something to be proud of for that we've been able to, amass that kind of power and influence. But it's also like if you're not careful with it, you end up in the situation. You end up as Rome, as British
as I
Empire.
always ask, that kind of military power comes at a cost. So, what are we giving up in terms of infrastructure or social services to have that powerful? And does it need to be that powerful? I mean, there's the famous quip that the U.S. military is stronger than the next 32 militaries in the world combined. When you consider that 28 of those militaries are our allies, that tells you a lot about how twisted the logic here is.
Yeah, and honestly, if that military, the other thing is, it's like when you have that military, you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to sit there and do nothing with it, which ends up with a lot of problems on its own, or you start trying to find places to go use it. which also is,
Well,
so
I
there's,
think,
yeah.
I think it's a little different than that. It's a case
Please.
of when the only tool in your toolbox is a hammer, soon every problem begins to look like a nail. So
I love that expression, yes.
when we have this giant military, every problem that crops up, suddenly, well, the only way to solve that problem is to throw the military at it. And in some cases, historically, military problems that the military isn't either appropriate or suited for. And a perfect case in point is the number of times, for example, that the Navy gets sent to go help with disaster relief in overseas locations. You know, couldn't we have some other federal organization that did that, that specialized in disaster relief, where we fly in these people and the appropriate equipment to help our friends and allies across the world, rather than sending the military to do it? It always leaves me wondering.
Yeah, well, and that gets back to the same. You got the same problem with the police too, but I think with the military, with the police, the average person feels it more. With the military, I think the impact on our country is significantly greater, especially when we start trying to. When we start applying it to the Middle East. So Michael says that I believe it's about the NRA. 4.3 million members is the leaked number as of November 2022. So at least there was some precedent for my 5 million.
No, that makes a lot more sense. But I thought it was interesting that the NRA was actually claiming at one point they had 79 million members. So what the hell?
Well, listen, if I'm going to walk into a congressman's office, I'd rather walk in saying I've got 75 million people behind me than 5. So,
75 million people with guns behind them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I think what that number really is the number of people who have been members at any point in the NRA's history. So people who are, decades dead are still being counted as that part of that number.
Or I just thought every year. So like if you renew your membership next year, it counts as a new membership. So it's like if you just tally up.
It's worse than that. The NRA for the longest time, if you'd ever not even become a member, just signed up for the newsletter, you were counted as a, supporter, a member of the NRA, even though you'd never paid them any money.
North Korea is a textbook example of the pitfalls of putting too much of a country's economy into its military. In their case, the rest of the population literally starving. I'd like your take on that. I mean, I agree.
Juche. That's not Juche, that's Juche.
I have no idea.
J-U-C-H-E, which is the North Korean term for essentially self-reliance. The idea is you can't count on anybody, even other friendly communist states, to be your friends and allies. Only North Korea can rely only upon itself.
Yeah, I think there are a number.
You have, millions starving, but no, we're not going to ask anybody for aid. That would be embarrassing.
In your experience, if you can think of an example, what would be a prototypical example for you of a country that basically collapsed under the weight of its own military?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. To some extent, I think you could contend that the Soviet Union did.
Would you at least find tenable the argument that was Reagan's goal was to get them to continue to build up nuclear?
Reagan comes into office and immediately starts this massive buildup of the U.S. military. Now, there's an old classic strategy term, guns or butter, which is a nation can either have guns or it can have butter, but it can't have both. That's largely true, with the exception of the United States. Even during the Civil War, World War I, and World War II, not only were we producing all the military equipment and the personnel we needed to field to handle that equipment, our economy was still enlarging in the civil sector during those times. The U.S. has never truly been on what one might call a war footing. Conversely, in World War II, the Soviets did do that, and absent American lend-lease, we like to think of, we gave them airplanes and tanks and stuff. No, the main thing we gave the Russians that helped keep them in the war was food, because they had to take all the agricultural workers and send them to the front. And it was exports of grain and spam and stuff like that that saved Russia. And after the war, they kind of kept that going. They kept buying more and more military equipment, kept that huge standing army going. And that's where you get the situation of, there's stores, but there's nothing on the shelves. Everybody's queuing up in these long, long lines waiting to buy butter or eggs or, shoes or whatever, because there was a black market economy if people would just get whatever they got in those lines, and then they'd use those to exchange with their friends to get what they really needed. It didn't matter what you were getting in the line. You just had something to trade. That was key. And that's why they collapsed, because if they ever done a significant job of cutting back on how big that military was, they would have had free industrial capacity and free workers to actually have a civilian economy where people weren't having to barter to survive. So I think there's a good argument that that's what it is. I mean, as I said, as you alluded to, Reagan came in and said, we're going to just keep building up our military more and more, and they will be in the same arms race with us. We can afford to do it and still improve our civilian sector economy. The Russians can't. And so the more they got into this arms race with us, the worse the civilian side economy got. That's what effectively brings down. So,
All right. Well, I think with that, I'm going to call it a night. We had a number of super chats and people helping out, which I really appreciate. Also, remember, like and subscribe. That really helps us. And one of the best ways to help us, if you like this content and if you think what we're talking about is important, share it with someone else who you think is going to like it. You're doing them a favor. You're doing us a favor. Helps everybody out. So we would really appreciate if you can do that. Come join us on the Discord, and we continue these conversations there. You can tag Commander McMillan, and he's great about getting back to people about questions, and he's as amicable on our Discord as he is right here, and just as approachable, and knows what he's talking about. So come join us on the Discord, and we will be seeing you guys absent any breaking news, and I'm hoping for no breaking news really for a while. I will tell you this. My favorite shows usually are the breaking news, and the reason is there's a lot of adrenaline, a lot's going on, and when the machine that all of us have together built here starts running and running well, it is a sight to behold. Unfortunately, you can't behold it and be doing it at the same time, but you can sit back afterwards and say that was pretty amazing, and I'm very proud of the news that we do. But I'm hoping for no breaking news for a little while. I think we're all, or only good breaking news allowed. Yeah, I think we'd all like to take a little bit of a break. Xandrig and I will be on Tuesday to just do, I think, a news brief, catch everybody up on what's been going on. There's already been a lot that's happened, as I'm sure you know. All of the federal cases against Trump have been dropped. Everybody's preparing for California is preparing to implement local laws to resist federal meddling in the future. It's starting. So we're going to give everybody a break this week. Next week,
it's not just California. Washington's doing it too.
Washington, you said?
Yep. And I haven't checked with my friends in Oregon, but I'll bet they're doing it as well. The whole West Coast is like, so.
Yeah, it really is on. So we're gonna start covering that next week. We're also in the middle of November. We are going to be having Greg Terry on. At least that's the plan. Is to have him on once a week. It's gonna be him, 𝐒𝐨𝐿𝐼𝐶 and Commander and I, and we are gonna cover Ukraine to the best of our ability. We anticipate new wrinkles in the Ukraine strategy going forward. It's a little hard to know what those are going to be because Trump is extraordinarily unpredictable. Again, everybody's hoping that Biden, in his last days remaining, just says, "Oh, we're sending everything that we owe them. We're going to let them do long range." I'm not as convinced as others that that's highly likely. Out of curiosity, what's your over under on Biden making any significant changes on Ukraine?
Would I like him to? Yes. Will he? Yeah, but
That's where I am. All right.
I think the administration is so busy right now trying to play catch up to figure out how to protect things from the incoming administration that they can't devote a lot of time to thinking about this.
Michael, I know I said we were going to go. Michael says this will fracture the states. Yes, maybe, maybe not. We've had this discussion before about how the first Civil War started. Again, yes, it was circumstances similar to this, but we've been in circumstances similar to this before. So it's that's a whole nother show in and of itself. And if I can get the commander in to be willing to talk about it, I think that would be a great one. We covered, the Civil War before and where we stand on that. And I'm sure we'll cover it again. I'd also like to get into conspiracy theories. We didn't get into that too much tonight. Commander had sent me some interesting left-wing conspiracy theory stuff, and it's nice to know that us leftists can come up with just as good a conspiracy theory as the right.
Yeah, we can set our hair on fire just as readily as they
So, at any rate, thank you all once again for joining us. We'll be seeing you guys. Hopefully, we'll be back up to 2 or 3 shows a week starting next week. Thank you for your support. Thank you for the sharing and for putting it on Discord servers. If you know people who are interested, might be interested. Let them know. Helps everybody out. Thank you all, and have a great night and good weekend.